Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I am your host, Paul O'Need, and today I am joined by my first Olympian guest, Edose Ibadin. Edose was a self-proclaimed average college runner, which I don't necessarily believe him, but he went on to be an Olympian in 2024 with Team Nigeria running the 800 meter. He's also a professional runner for Under Armour, and he is a coach in the mindset and performance psychology space. Edose, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Paul. Thank you for the great intro. I truly appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. I am actually the absolute worst at intros. I think you got the best one I've ever done. So pretty solid.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So self-proclaimed average runner in college who goes on to be sponsored by Under Armour and competing at the Olympics. How does that happen?
Man, just hard work, belief in yourself, and just sticking with the process, not overcomplicating things, but just doing, I tell people, just basic things really well and consistently over a long period of time.
That's I mean, at the risk of sounding offensive, that's pretty standard. That's a standard answer. There had to be more that went into it.
I mean, honestly, that's really the honest truth. Like,
Perfect. Great answer.
yeah,
Great answer. That's what I was looking for. Um, well, that all makes sense because, we know that excellence is just mediocrity repeated over and over and over again. It's something that we preach on the podcast here when it comes to coaching and business, when it comes to training, when it comes to nutrition. It's all the same. But in a sport like running, you're talking about something that is interesting. So I actually recently got into running. Funny enough, sitting here, 230 pounds, I'm getting into running. Um, it's simple. It's something we've done on the surface. It's very simple. Something that we've done since we were kids. Something that you kind of crawl, then you walk, then you run, then you play sports, and then if you choose to compete in track and field or cross country or distance running, whatever, it's the same pattern repeated over and over and over again. But you and I both know, me coming from a strength and conditioning background, having taught people how to be fast, you coming from being one of the fastest people on the planet, that stride is incredibly complex. So when you say you were an average runner, was it a technical thing? Was it a physical capacity thing? Where were your particular deficits?
I think in college, some of my deficits were definitely more so on the endurance aspect of the 800.
Hmm.
And so the 800 is one of those races where it's like sprinting meets distance running. And so
Mhm.
it's the perfect blend of both speed and endurance. And so throughout high school and most of college, we trained more so on the speed end. And I wasn't able to really finish races quite as well as I needed to get over to like that next level. And now, granted, when I say average college athlete, I think for me it was just having never made an NCAA final. So that means to make an NCAA final, you have to place top 8 in the NCAA.
Right.
I was fortunate enough to actually have gone to national championship in the 800 indoors, but just didn't quite get on the podium and get like that All American trophy and stuff like that.
So,
But no, so go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, for context, what times are you running in the 800 meter versus like what the world record is or what's going to win at the Olympics?
Yeah. So my current PR now is 1 minute and 44 seconds. Um,
that's, that's bananas.
yeah, it's actually crazy when I say it out loud. But the world record is 1 minute and 40, and then at the Olympics, it's varied each one. So there's
Mhm.
been some Olympics where it's been 1 in a minute 45, and then there's other Olympics
Oh,
where it was one with the world record. So like the world record was actually set at the London Olympics. So it just depends on the year. Each race is different. So it's kind of hard to I can compete with the best of them, but
yeah.
definitely it varies from year to year depending on like how the races run and the conditions and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's sprinting in the Olympics is my favorite thing to watch. I think it's so incredible. Like from the 1, the 2 to 3, the 4, the 8, even up to like the longer distances when we see people running a 5K in like 15 minutes. You're like, what the hell is happening here? Um, so you're in college, you're making it to NCAA national championships. Where'd you go to college?
I went to Hampton University, so it's a small HBCU in Hampton, Virginia.
So you go to Hampton, a small HBCU, and you make it to nationals. What was your experience at nationals, and where did this journey with regards to mindset and psychology start?
Yeah, so my experience at national, so like my biggest goal coming into college was I wanted to be NCAA All American. Like that was my biggest dream to be NCAA All American first team. And I unfortunately came up a little bit short. So if you make the final in my event, the 800, you're automatically first team All American.
Okay.
I get there and I finish ninth. So you can imagine how devastated I actually am at this
Oh
point.
my gosh.
Yeah, I at one point I was grateful to be there, but at the same time I was just I think I was probably crying too because like I really wanted to be first team All American. Like that's been the main goal for me since I entered college. And when I came up short, I was just like, no, what is going on here? Like what the heck? And so I think the mindset journey kind of started in college, but I really didn't take it as serious until some years after college. So like right before COVID hit, that's when I really started taking the mindset stuff really serious.
So what was your running journey? You know, you finished college as a national competitor, then to go from, missing being an all-American to now being a sponsored athlete. Mine, I mean, consider me definitely the audience, completely uninitiated to the track and field world, because there's a ton of money in track and field. But how does that process go? Like, do you just find a team and keep running? Do you have to get someone to sponsor you right off the bat? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so my journey was a very unique one.
Okay.
So just for some context, I ran 148 coming out of college, a minute 48. And at the time, I was kind of at a crossroad. And for me, it was like, okay, I want to continue running. Like I see a lot of people run post grad and they try to make it work. Some people get sponsorships right out, fresh off the bat, and other people don't. For me, of course, I wasn't one of those people who got something right off the bat just because I wasn't like first team All American or NCAA champion or anything like that. But I knew I wanted to run, but I just didn't know how I was going to do it. And so my degree was actually in electrical engineering in undergrad.
Oh.
And I was considering just, working in that field and then going from there. Um, so I moved back home after college, and so I'm applying for jobs and stuff like that. Because right now I'm still like kind of on the fence about it. Um, and then I remember getting a call from my college coach, and he told me like, "Yeah, check my email." I checked the email, and then it's an email from this club coach just mentioning like, "Hey, we're forming a new club here in DC." And so background, I'm from Maryland, so like a lot of people they tend to have to move far away to like go to different training situations and stuff like that. But I get the email. I didn't really. I don't think I responded to it. But then I
Hmm.
think my coach gave the coach my number, and so then I get a phone call, and it's the coach. And I'm thinking like at first I was thinking, oh, maybe a phone number to like a job I applied to or something like that. And so he
Hmm.
just telling me like, we're forming a new team here in DC, full of 800-meter runners and 1500-meter runners, guys ranging from about 148 to 150. We've seen what you've done in college. We like your resume. We think you'd be a good fit for our program. And I was a little bit hesitant at first because I knew the training that it was going to entail. I wasn't really used to.
Hmm.
And but for me, it was just I had to take that leap. And so when I didn't have anything like else to do, I was kind of like, let me just see let me just see this out. Let me see what this is about. And so basically, I ended up joining the club team, and we're doing all this training. And sometimes a lot of athletes who are in this situation, they have to work like part-time jobs to like kind of make ends meet and stuff like that because they don't have like the sponsorship support and stuff. Um, and for me, my plan was just, okay, I'm just going to run for another year. If this year goes great, I'll continue. If not, I can, call it quits. This is back in 2016 at this point. And
Hmm.
so I end up, training with this team, and training is going really, really well. We're working on some of the weaknesses that I had in college, and I saw myself improving and getting better. And we do some races, and I'm matching my college PRs like months earlier. Like, say for example, I run my PR in May, towards the end of the season in college.
Hmm.
I'm running my PRs towards the beginning of the season here, and I'm running these races coming through the first lap a lot slower than I would in college. But I'm still able to match, the time I did. So I'm like, oh snap! Like, this season
Hmm.
might be really good. Like, let's actually see what I can do here. And so then the end of that first season, I went from a minute 48 to a minute 46, and I think that kind of showed me that, okay, this is something you need to like try to do and pursue and see how far you can take it, because you just dropped 2 seconds. Like, who knows how far you can go from here.
So where does sponsorship come into play? Like, are you reaching out to sponsors? Are you just, if I run fast, they're going to call me kind of thing?
So for me, like I said, my case is very, very unique.
Hmm.
So my coach, he reached out to Under Armour to see if like, because they were kind of getting into the running space as
Hmm.
well. And so typically how it normally works is an athlete will get an agent, and then an agent is the one who will reach out to the sponsors on the athlete's behalf. I didn't have an agent, just primarily because, one, I didn't really run fast enough to have an agent. And
Right.
so my coach kind of acted as our agent. He was like our pseudo agent essentially early
Hmm.
on. And he reached out to Under Armour because they're based in Baltimore, and our team was based in DC slash Northern
Okay.
Virginia. So we weren't too far from each other, and so we kind of formed that relationship with them over the years. Like, I remember doing a photo shoot for them back in 2016, so that was like my first exposure to Under Armour and seeing like what kind of shoes they have, what kind of clothes they have, and then we kind of always kind of just kept that relationship going. And so whenever they needed athletes for like different photo shoots, we would do it, and then eventually they went on to sign our whole team. And this is 4 years after I graduated from college.
Hmm.
So it took a little while to finally get a sponsorship, but definitely super grateful for that opportunity, because I know everybody doesn't get it.
So how are you earning money in those 4 years? And I mean, does the sponsorship earn you a living? Like, what? I don't know enough about the sport, and I know the audience is probably quite curious to know, like, what are the inner workings of, your train? I know how it is in Canada because
Mm-hmm.
I'm from Canada. I coached a couple national level competitors. One of them, was a javelin thrower. Dude, this guy was working a full work day. He would come in and lift in the morning, would work a full work day, then go to track practice for 3 or 4 hours in the evening. And he was barely making ends meet, taking the bus each way. Is it the same way in the US? Like, what did that 4 year stint look like for you?
Yeah, so man, it was definitely a struggle at first. So I was fortunate enough to where I lived with my parents, so my expenses were really, really low.
Hmm.
And I did take public transportation to get to practice. I used to take the trains to DC, and then my coach would pick me up, and we would drive to the track or drive to the trail, wherever we were doing that day, meet him at a certain station, and then go from there. And so I was working part-time jobs here and there. I worked part-time like at a tax place. I ended up getting let go from that because they said I wasn't needed anymore. And then I was doing little running event things where they would give us like, $200 stipend here, $300, $500, and even some of the photo shoots that we did, we got paid from those as well. And then I went after my first year post grad. I went on to graduate school, and then I
Hmm.
was able to secure an internship that way. Most of my grad program was online, so it still gave me something to do while I was still running. And then I had the internship, so that was kind of, I was able to kind of fund, like, buy food here and there, and also like miscellaneous spending money and stuff like that. And then did that for about two ish. No, sorry. I was in grad school for 2 years, but I did the internship for a semester.
Okay.
And yeah, just did some like odd jobs here and there, and stuff like that. And luckily, I had a lot of support from my club team. So at one point, they were helping pay for my metro train station rides and stuff like
Oh,
that.
wow.
So we had a lot of donors who donated to the club. And so they essentially were almost funding my whole journey, um, in this post grad before the sponsorship kicked in and stuff like that. And luckily, shortly after graduating grad school, and I graduated my degree in IT and software engineering, I was able to. Under Armour came in the picture maybe like a couple months after that, so things kind
Gotcha.
of worked out really, really well for me. And then in terms of sponsorship, so sometimes even people with the sponsorships, like some sponsorships just don't pay that much, unfortunately.
Hmm.
Um, Luckily for me, because I was still living at home at this point, um, like I said, my expenses were really low, so it was good money, but it wasn't like life changing money. Like it's not okay. I'm never gonna have to work a job in my life. No, I'm still gonna have to
You're not buying a
do things on.
Benz.
Yeah, exactly. You're not buying a bed. Some people do, but or some people, they do get contracts that big and sponsorships that big where they're able to do that. But I think the average runner with the sponsorship really isn't probably making that much money. And some of them might still work because they choose to. I know some people on my team they still work sometimes because just for the extra money. But it's so typically the way it works is they give you a base salary and then you get bonus incentives. Like if you hit this time, you get this much. You get this time, you get that much. And
Okay.
then if you win like a certain amount of races, you get this much. And then even some races themselves will also give you a check as well for that too. And then depending on the country you run for, the country can pay you as well. So it just all depends. There's different ways to make money, but like for me, I run for Nigeria, and so Nigeria isn't probably the best with paying, but they have paid us where like when we went to the Olympics, they paid us. When we went to World Championships, they paid us. They usually pay us when we finally get to these big meets, but I think the issue is that athletes need support in order to get to those meets. So
Right.
that's kind of been the disconnect a little bit. But yeah, so that's typically how it works.
So dude, I don't really know where to go with this because there's so many themes within your journey. Like even just the amount of trust in yourself or belief in your trust in yourself that you must have had to take that leap and say, I'm going to still pursue running. I think I can do this. To then seeing the progress and kind of continuing to build on it and trusting the process through this 4-year period of uncertainty. There's a lot of mental gymnastics that I'm sure went into that. But then your degree is in software engineering and IT, yet now you're working in mindset and psychology. Can you square that circle for me?
Yeah, I could try. And it's a lot of man. Looking back, there's definitely a lot of mental gymnastics for sure. And I think just the belief I had in myself far outweighed a lot of other people's opinions. Because I remember people used to always ask me, like, why are you still doing this? My parents were asking me, and I'm still living with them, you
Hmm.
know, why are you still doing this? My parents are Nigerian, and I don't know if you are familiar with Nigerian culture, but
I'm
they
familiar
don't
with
put,
immigrant parents.
yeah, immigrant parents, there we go. So, immigrant parents, they don't, they're all about, education, getting a good job and
Stability.
all that
Yep.
stuff, and stability, exactly. So it's like, we didn't immigrate all this way just for you to be here suffering. Um, so my dad is like constantly harping on me, like, "Oh, why are you doing this thing? What's going on?" My mom is, same thing, like, "What are you doing? What is going on?" Da 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 da. And actually, that was part of the reason why I even went to grad school in the first place. So I
Mm,
didn't. Well, not yeah, it was a big part. Actually, probably
me
like 80%,
too.
honestly. Um, and so went to grad school so they could not bug me as much as to why I'm still pursuing running. And I remember legit right after graduating, I had a meet the next week, and then my dad was like, "You're still running?" And funny enough, I actually ran a PR that weekend too, so that's kind of funny.
In spite.
But yeah, exactly.
Fueled by
So
spite.
yeah, so pretty much like just throughout that whole period, my parents, just why are you still doing this? Why are you still doing this? And for me, it was just I just didn't want to leave any what if I had stopped right after college, like I would have missed out on all of this. So for me, it was just
Mhm.
that belief in myself, but then also that curiosity and that wonder of like, okay, let's see how far I can actually take this thing and just go from there. I'm not sure the
Did
other
Oh,
question,
it's okay.
other part of the
The
question. Correct.
I asked a lot of stuff. Um, the other part of that. So is that belief something that you've always had, or did that have to be cultivated?
I think it's a mix of both. And
Okay.
I say it's a mix of both because I think naturally I've always been an optimistic person.
Mhm.
Um, but I think I've had coaches who told me that I have a lot of talent and potential on the track. And I'm not one of those people who, well, I believe I'm not one of those people who can just, do nothing and like just run fast instantly. But I think for me, it's like there's talent there, but it has to be, worked on and ironed
Mhm.
out and shaped. And so almost every coach I've had told me at one point that there's some ability here and you just have to keep working. And so them believing in me at those times helped me like work even harder. And I think for me, my talent was quote unquote the things that don't necessarily require talent, like being consistent, showing up on time, good character, being
Mhm.
coachable. I think and I think some people they'll make it seem like those things don't require talent, but I would disagree that some of those like they don't require innate talent, but I do think having some levels of consistency and focus, like some people are just naturally better at focusing than other people, and I think that was one of my biggest superpowers. Just growing up and just in general, I think being able to do those things really well. Those are the boring talents that some people might think of, but I think those are things that I was really talented in for sure.
That's really interesting. I've never thought about those things in this context of talent because I think there has to be some level of motivation. There has to be some level of discipline. There also has to be some level of an identity. So, maybe your identity as someone who just does those not fancy things played a role within that. But I'm sure also having, I know for me, my father immigrated from Lebanon to Canada. And so my own journey was I went into coaching and then I took an unpaid internship and he was like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And then he's like, "Well, if you're there, just go to school." I was like, "Oh, okay, dad, I'll go to grad school." Ended up doing 2 master's degrees. And then when I got my dream job, quote unquote, and I told him how much I was making, he was like, "What?" Because college strength coaches don't make a lot of money, right? So my first
Mm-hmm.
my first paycheck, my first like full-time head strength conditioning coach job was the equivalent of $37,000 US a year.
Oh,
And so I'm sitting here with 2 master's degrees, so stoked about this job. And I tell my dad, and he was like, I thought he was going to disown me. But like you, I just had this belief that it was going to grow, and it actually ended up having me leave that career and start my own business where even then I said, "Hey, dad, I'm going to go work for myself." And he's like, "Oh, you need stability." And at the time I had a good full-time job. I was making okay money. And I was like, "I'm going to quit this job. I'm going to go full time." And so for me, I had to prove to him that I could make good money working for myself so that I could give up the stability. But there was a self-trust there for me that I actually didn't need to work. I think I'm very similar to you. I just did the little not fancy things over and over and over again until success happened. Um, when you look at the role mental conditioning and mindset played within your journey, why have you decided now to make that your career when, I mean, realistically, software engineering and IT is probably the most in demand career possible right now?
yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think so for me, right, 2019 going into 2020, at this point, I had run a minute 45 in the 800, but I had been stuck there for like 2 years at this point. And I
Okay.
remember going to like this coaching seminar that my team kind of put together. And there was an Olympian who was a guest speaker there who also ran the 800. And so I was asking, so yeah, he had ran a minute 43. So I looked up to him a lot. And I remember asking him like, yo, how do I break through? Like I've been running 145 now for 2 years. I really want to break through to 144. What can I do? He told me like, it's all up here. It's all up here. And so that's when I really decided to take mindset stuff a little bit more serious. So I was essentially my own first client. And so right after grad school, I started reading a lot of just books just for fun. And so I
Hmm.
started reading like some motivational books, some mindset books here and there. And then I read a book called The Champion's Mind by Dr. Jim Afremow. And
Okay.
I think that book was very pivotal in my mindset journey because I think that's what kickstarted everything. Like it taught me, like I knew about visualization and stuff like that, but I only visualized right before races. Whereas now I visualize like before almost every workout at this point. And so I think in terms of, you know, reading that book and then reading other mental books, I really was starting to cultivate like this passion for mindset. And then Under Armour at the time, this is 2020 now. Under Armour, they brought us to a performance summit, and they brought in a mental performance coach who happened to be an Olympian. She was an Olympic volleyball player, and I remember her talking to us, and the stuff she was telling us, I was just like, I feel like I can run through a brick wall right now. And I remember how confident she made me feel in that room. And I told myself, I want to make other people feel the exact same way. And I think that's where it started for me.
What was it about what she said? Like what was the pivotal thing?
I think it was just like she was just saying things like, how do you feel when you're at your best? And at this time, I'm also injured, so I experienced my first
Mm.
injury, and I remember reading the book, The Champion's Mind, talking about how like when you're injured, you still got to train your mind the way you would your body. And so I'm doing the visualization still, and then on top of that, I experienced my first injury as I'm deep diving into this mental stuff. So I'm like, I have no choice but to train my mind the way I train my body. And so just for context, I started running in 2009, and I didn't get my first injury or serious injury until 2020. So yeah, that's like 11 years of just being completely healthy. And the injury only took me out for a month, but I say all that to say I was able to really do a lot of visualization. So when she was talking, it was just how do you feel when you at your best? She was saying like you feel like yeah, like hell yeah, you can do this. And the stuff she was just telling me, I don't know, I just felt really good, and I felt extremely motivated. And she was also mentioned like letting go of the outcome. And I feel like that was the first time I ever heard of that. And for me at the time, that was an Olympic year, and it was just like I have to let it go, right? And that doesn't mean like give up, but it just means letting go of the outcome. I don't have control over this thing, so let me just go all in on what is in my control. And so that's what I did. And then little did I know the whole world was going to shut down maybe like a month after that, or not even a month after that, but like 3 weeks after that. So I felt really inspired by her, and yeah, I just felt really good to like hear that session. I just remember thinking to myself, like, man, the way she made me feel in that room, I want to really make other people feel the same way. And I think I would be more fulfilled doing that versus engineering.
So how did you start educating yourself to be able to be in a position to coach others?
Yeah, so it all started kind of similar year when I started reading. When I first read that one book, one book turned into two, and then three, and then five. So I'm a big avid reader, so I read a lot of books about mindset. And like I said, I was my own first client, and so I just essentially just teach people what I've learned and what's helped me in my own career. Um, and so, funny enough, that season, you know, after getting the injury, I actually ended up running a PR, that summer. So I went from not being able to run for a whole month to now getting back into running slowly and then PRing that summer. And I just remember a lot of the mental work that went into it for me to get myself out of that injury. Um, I felt qualified enough to be able to teach people the same thing.
It's not unlike most people's journey in coaching training or coaching nutrition. Most of us, well, the majority of people now coaching don't have formal education in coaching. It's more so I've done it for myself. Let me try to do it for other people. And then you build up this like portfolio of evidence that your systems work. And you mentioned your injury, and I thought it was funny because my about 18 months ago, I tore both my quads. And I was in a wheelchair for 6 months, and the mental fortitude that I built during that rehab process and the way that I approached it allowed me to get on a bodybuilding stage a year later with the best physique I've ever had. And I attribute that 100% to the change that went on between my ears. I think most people learn the biggest lessons through hardship. When you're talking about an elite level athlete, your hardship is daily. Like your training sessions are grueling. How does the mindset work integrate with that brutal type of training? Like, is there a daily routine that you go through that kind of builds over the course of a season?
Yeah, so for sure. I think, like you mentioned, the daily routine that we do is just insane, and how we, train and stuff like that. And one thing for me that I try to do is, so luckily my coach sends us workouts the night before. And so
Okay.
that morning I wake up and I try to visualize myself, running the reps, doing the things I practice, and first person point of view. A lot of times we look at it in a third person point of view, but I try to visualize myself doing it in a first person point of view, so much to the point where I can kind of feel my feet touching the ground with each stride and each step as I'm doing this. And so it kind of makes me get into that mental state. And then I like to show up to practice early to just kind of get my mind relaxed and ready to go. So I try to do like, you know, massage gun stuff and rolling out, just prehab stuff, preventative exercises and activation stuff to kind of just relax and get my mind going and stuff like that, just to prepare for the task at hand. And one thing I always try to work on is my self talk. And this is something that, if I see the workout, I know it's going to be hard. I really tell myself, okay, instead of, oh my God, this is going to hurt, I try to tell myself, let's just see where we're at. I'm going to body this workout. I'm a man of faith, so I like to pray before my workouts as well. And so those are all things that I do going into practice. Sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't go well. And in the times where it doesn't go well, it's like, you know what? On to the next. I really rarely ever beat myself up. And I think that's something that I had to really work on, because I was someone who used to beat myself up a lot. And so that was some of the mental skills that I picked up on, and just how what we say to ourselves is extremely important. And the more I practiced self talk, the quicker and easier it was for me to filter out the negative ones and replace it with something more positive.
So when we're talking about visualization, let's get into a bit of the nitty gritty here because I'm a big visualization guy. Like when I was powerlifting, competing at the highest level, visualization happened before every training session. I even sat down after every training session and kind of went through the session in my head, how it went, how I felt, what changes I wanted to make for the next training session. Before competitions, I even like booked into my schedule visualization time for meet day, what that was going to look like. What are some like keys to visualization if people want to make it really effective?
I think some of the biggest keys is, one, visualizing in first person point of view.
Okay.
And I think both is great, but I think doing it in a first person point of view kind of just puts you in your mind's eye how it's going to actually look when you do it versus you watching in the audience, right? I think when you visualize in first person, it takes you to that mode to where, all right, we're doing this. I'm not watching you do this, but we're actually doing this. And two, I think visualizing just like how you actually hype yourself up. So like what it looks like when you're walking to the track, what it looks like when you're walking to the gym, that those few minutes beforehand, like what does that look like? How are you mentally preparing? And so I think those are some of the biggest keys that have helped me with my visualization. Is just getting into my life. What do my clothes feel like? What am I? What does it feel like when I'm tying my shoes, my shoes on? What does it look like when I'm doing my drills? How good do I look? How good do I want to look? How does my body feel as I'm doing this? And I think, and also really just staying as present as possible as you're visualizing as well, because it's so easy to kind of visualize and just, let your mind wander into something else and do something else, but really learning to focus it back onto the present moment and what it is that you're trying to visualize.
Dude, I love that you went into like how detailed you are with your visualization because that was one thing I always harp on whenever I have clients do it. I used to go down to like, what's the chalk going to feel like in my hands? How's the knurling on the bar going to feel? How tight am I going to feel under the bar? And I remember, I was like 2 weeks out from a competition and I was sitting in traffic and I was visualizing while I was in traffic and I actually let my foot off the brake.
Oh, snap.
and I just bumped the guy in front of me. I was like, oh my God. But that was like the peak of, okay, well, obviously you're getting into that mindset. It was to the point where like I would almost get like neurologically aroused while I was
Yes.
visualizing, where it's like,
Hmm.
okay, I need to like calm myself down here a little bit.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're feeling.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that.
people underestimate the power of visualization because you can go into a workout maybe you've never done before, but in your head, you've done it 1,000 times.
Yeah.
You talked quite a bit, like whether it's your own personal journey or the unlock that you made after listening to that woman speak, of focusing on the process versus the outcome. And this is something that I am very fascinated with. I think a lot about, and I want to have like more discussions about process orientation because I feel like it is the true key to success. As soon as you relinquish your attachment to some sort of outcome and you decide on the process and execute the process, the outcome will take care of itself. What for you, maybe how hard was that? Because I mean, with running, it's like, I'm going to run and I'm going to try and run as fast as I can. I can't control the track. I can't control the weather. I can't control the wind. I can't, but the track doesn't change. I mean, you're going to wear the same shoes that you race in. There's a lot of consistencies there, but there's also things outside your control. The clock is always going to be 1 second at a time. That's a lot of stuff that's like one end of the spectrum versus the other. How did that process work for you?
Yeah, so for me, what trust in the process looked like is just, doing what I'm saying I'm going to do. So like
Hmm.
in a week basis, I do my runs, I do a track session, I do a speed session, I do cross training. So that's like biking and elliptical. So like every facet of training, I'm doing it and I'm dialed in while I do it and making sure that, I don't do too much, but I also do what I need to do as well. Because a lot of times some people overdo things and they end up getting injured. And so for me, it's just how consistent can I be while doing this? Even though it might be boring, even though I might go on this 10-mile long run or 8-mile long run, do I feel like doing it all the time? No, but I know this is something that I need to do. And then even sometimes stretching like after practice, sometimes I just want to go home. And it's like, no, let
Yep.
me do my rope stretching, isolated stretching and stuff like that. Just do it and making sure that I'm staying healthy and stuff like that. And then also, another thing that I do, and even lifting too, like sometimes I might do the same lifts over and over again. And I'm just like, this is so boring. I don't feel like doing it. But doing these things, I know was going to help me, progress throughout the season and be the best runner that I can be. And then mainly just showing up, right? Showing up to
Mhm.
the track all the time, showing up to the gym all the time when I need to, and just doing like very little basic things and doing those basic things really, really well. And for me, that's the process. And so when I let go of the outcome, it's okay. Let me focus on what it is that I want to do and not worry about the things I can't control, right? What are some
Yeah.
of the things that I'm able to control? I can control how I show up. I can control my effort. I can control my actions. What I can't control is, the weather. I can't control what track I run on. I can't control how my other competitors do in the race. I can only control what I do in the race. And so just really focusing all in on what is within my control and acting fast on what is within my control, but then being patient with what isn't within my control.
Yeah. I really thought that for me, powerlifting was one thing where it's like very outcome oriented. You either lift the weight or you don't. When I switched over to bodybuilding, there was this element of, because it's so subjective, I can only bring whatever I can bring. So am I going to eat my food, do my cardio, train my balls off, and then respond to what my feedback my body's giving me over the course of that, 20-week prep period? It's like I just only have process because the outcome is so far away. Not only that, in the same way I feel like it is with running, although, do you guys know who's competing in what races ahead of time?
Yeah, we do sometimes. Most of the times we do.
Most of the time. So like in bodybuilding, especially in the amateur ranks, dude, I could show up in the best shape of my life, but and this happened to me. I showed up and in my own category, I destroyed the other guy, like just destroyed him. But then when you go to the open category, this random dude who got his pro card the next week showed up. So I'm like, well, I guess I'm losing really bad. Yet I looked the best I've ever had. But to me, I still won. And actually the language that I use is either winning or victory. So to me, I had a victory. Even though I didn't win, I still had a victory. Um, and then now it's a bit of a different mindset where I've picked up running, and I ran a half marathon in college, but since then I probably ran from the age of 21 to the age of 38. I probably ran a total of 5 miles. Like like there was no running. Um, any cardio I did was either like bike, elliptical, stairmaster. There was no running. And now I'm in a position where like I'm running. And my first workout, I remember it was 5 sets of 1 minute run, 1 minute walk. And I thought I was going to die. It's my heart rate got up to 174 running
Sheesh.
for 1 minute intervals. And and then that allowed me to do is like, I suck so bad at this that I literally cannot have any focus on the outcome because the outcome is terrible. So I went from squatting 800 pounds as like one of the top 5 strongest people to ever compete in powerlifting to a guy who is the worst runner on the planet in my eyes. And so there is only process. And tell me this, and I'm going to throw my prediction and you can throw it back at me if I'm wrong. You probably had more fun training and racing when you let go of the outcome than you did probably in the previous years of you running.
Oh, 1000%. 1000%. And this is funny. It's funny that you say that, right? Because I remember at one point I came to the realization like, if I never get a contract and if I never make the Olympics, I can look back and know that I had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I can look back and realize that, you know, there was so much fun in the journey and I had a lot of joy in it. And I think that was probably one of my biggest strengths that have helped me be in it for this long is the fact that I wasn't super duper outcome focused. I'm like, all right, I need to get a contract. I need to get a contract. Or like, I have to make this Olympic team, right? If I make it, great. And I'm gonna be super grateful. Thank God that I did. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I knew that there was so much fun in the journey because I'm going to spend more time in the journey versus the destination. So I remember when I first signed my contract, super joyous, super happy. And then I remember thinking to myself, like, oh, this is it. Like, it's back. I got practice tomorrow. So I got to get
Yep.
ready to go and work out. And so that's when it hit me then, like, yo, you really have to enjoy the journey versus the destination. And then even at the Olympics, thank God that I was really in this, I was really just being more process oriented because I remember after the race, one of my friends who competed for Australia, he told me like, "You good, man? It's over." And I was just like, "That's it!" Like
Mm-hmm.
this moment that I've been working for, that I've been dreaming of, that I've been visualizing, I finally get here, and then it's over just like that. And then that's when I'm like, okay, yeah, it's so much more better to be more process oriented than it is outcome oriented because you're going to spend so much time in the process. So you might as well learn to enjoy this because you're going to spend the most time here than you do in the destination. And there's a quote that I really love, and it says, "You're going to spend more time climbing the mountain than you do at the peak." And so you're always going to be, working towards something. And whenever you achieve a new goal, you're going to look for the next thing. And so just making sure that we're having fun in the process and the journey is so important.
I love that you picked a quote about climbing the mountain because one of my favorite quotes, because I work with a lot of business owners who are highly driven individuals. So enjoying the wins is really hard for somebody who's very driven. And one thing is, once you're process oriented, the journey being the happiness in the journey becomes the win in of itself. But when you actually achieve the goal, there's so much more fulfillment attached to it because you did the thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you only focused on outcome and then you get it, that fleeting moment that you felt, Now it makes everything feel useless because, oh, fuck, well, I got to go do this again and get better. Whereas you can look back and say, like, wow, like I accomplished the goal that I set, but I did it the way that I wanted to do it.
Hmm.
The quote that I love is the best view of the next mountaintop is of the mountaintop you've just climbed.
That's a good one.
And because there's always going to be a next goal. So you've
Yeah.
made it to the Olympics, and I don't know, are you training for the next Olympics? Is that the goal?
Yeah, as of now, that's the goal. Yes.
So now you've been to the Olympics, you're now training for your next Olympics. This next process, in my eyes, is just refining the process that got you there the first time. And that curiosity that you've built and that excitement that you've built, it's you're probably having more fun this time than you did the last one.
Yeah, for sure. Having a
And
lot more fun.
you know, I find mindset stuff to be so underutilized by so many athletes, and I find it to be so like people don't talk about it nearly as much because it truly will make the difference between you getting to the end of a career and just having no good memories. I talk to a lot of people, especially business owners who have, exited companies or made millions of dollars, and they have no fond memories of how they got there. Whereas I meet people who have achieved success, who have done it their own way and through the process, and they get to the end of it and they're like, man, my life has been awesome. What are some of the things that you see as opportunities for young athletes to kind of get to a mindset where you are right now? Like you're an Olympian, you're one of the fastest people on the planet. And for all intents and purposes, you've enjoyed it every step of the way. What's your advice for that young athlete who is just focused on the next PR?
Yeah, man. But I would tell the young athlete is to one, do not compare yourself. Comparison is the thief of joy. And, I also do some volunteer coaching at a high school here and there. And the track world right now, especially at the high school level, is insane. Like,
Oh
these
yeah.
kids have access to social media. And so they're seeing kids run really fast, not only at the US level, but at the global level. Like they're seeing kids, oh, this boy in Australia ran this, or this boy in Africa ran this, or this guy in Canada ran this. When I was in high school, we only saw people who ran fast in the States. Now they're able to see people run fast, worldwide. And a lot of times kids will just say, oh, I'm cooked, and oh, they see someone run fast, well, but I can't do that. And so really just learning how to trust their journey and just knowing that progress isn't linear. And one thing I tell people too is that just because you're fast at 16 doesn't mean you're going to be fast at 21. And so, hopefully they are still fast at 21, but also just because you're slow at 16 doesn't mean that you're still going to be slow at 21. Because there's a lot of people who are way faster than me when we were 18 who will end up getting faster than at 22, 23. So really just trust your own process, focus on the plan that you have and the plan that your coaches have for you, and don't get so caught up in what everybody else is doing, because what works for one person might not necessarily work for you, and you can't really predict the future. Like right now, yes, on paper this kid right now might be better than you and faster than you and stronger than you, but who's to say that like you don't start working hard and then you get better and you improve and you make all these leaps and bounds and stuff like that, 3, 4, 5 years down the line.
I love that you brought up, early success is not a predictor of further success. And that I think early on in your career, whatever your goal is, whether it's business or running or lifting or bodybuilding, you're exposed to like the highest level achievers of that time. But I think you're proof in the pudding that just success in college doesn't guarantee success in the professional ranks. And if you continue to just progressively get better over time, you will get to where you want to go. How, you mentioned you've only had you had one injury and it took you, you know, from 2009 to that season, which over 10 years without an injury. I've personally found that people who are more outcome focused tend to make decisions that put them in compromising positions because they're looking for shortcuts. And I think your advice tells that young athlete that the shortcuts are not going to be what lead to success. Now, when you're looking at growing your business in the mindset space, who's that athlete that you're trying to help?
Man, honestly, that I'm trying to help is the 16-year-old version of me, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, that's the athlete I'm trying to help. The athlete who is like they have some belief, they have some type of talent, they're willing to put in the work, but they just don't quite know how to fully get themselves right in between the ears. Like they're coachable, but at the same time, with some certain mental tools, they'll be unstoppable. And I think that's the athlete I'm trying to reach. Like, who's like, I was naturally optimistic, but I still think there was a lot of mental skills and tools that I needed to learn and utilize. I wish I learned and utilized at an early age. Like, I wish I'm trying to be the athlete that, or the coach that I wish I had uh, as a younger athlete. So that's pretty much the athlete I'm trying to reach out to.
Was there like a pivotal race for you where you kind of saw all of your work come to fruition, like all that mindset work come to fruition?
Yes. I think it was probably when I ran 144 the first time. Um, it was 2020, it was during COVID. And I think when I saw myself do that, one, it was just a huge breakthrough. I had gotten injured that year. So there was just, that's when I realized, okay, this mental stuff really does work. And I think that whole year, that season, I was just learning about so much mindset stuff from January to August. Just, learning to let go of the outcome because injury will force you to do that real quick, right?
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't force the comeback. I had to really trust the process and not rush the comeback. So I had to let go of competing completely. I'm like, you know what? I'm not even going to be in a rush. I'm going to focus on what I can for rehab and then just go back to, running when I feel good and when it feels comfortable for me to run without any compensation or anything like that. And so I will say that year really, I think that's when it all like, when I saw it all come together and I was just like, wow, the power of the mind and the fact that I was able to do that and keep showing up. And then again, when I ran my Olympic qualifier, that year was 2023 I ran it, and so that was 3 years after I hadn't PR'd in 3 years. So I had seasons where it wasn't going as well as I would have liked it to, and then to be able to come back that year, still showing up, still having that belief in myself that I know if I can just make a tweak here or a pivot here, that it'll work out, and just being able to run, get back to that time really um, helped me a lot, and it just showed like this is what you were capable of this whole time, and I'm so glad you were able to see it through.
How did you do at the Olympics?
So I didn't do that great, I'm not gonna lie. But for me, I think just the journey to get there was honestly the win in itself. Like if you would have told me when I first started running track that I would have made it to the Olympics, I probably wouldn't have believed you. And so the fact that I, came out, as a 16-year-old not really knowing much, just really just doing this sport just because it was something to do to help my college application. Didn't even want to run in college at one point to now, making the Olympic team. I am forever grateful for the journey, and I'm so glad that I've been able to experience a journey like this one.
And I think it's so fascinating the Olympic, quadrennial cycle where every 4 years you get an opportunity to compete, but there's all these like little peaks throughout that 4 years, some bigger, obviously, and some smaller. Um,
Mhm.
does your mental approach, or maybe speak as an athlete or speak as a coach, how does the mental approach change? Let's say that first meet back from the Olympics versus the one where you're trying to requalify.
I think the approach changed. It kind of felt like a relief for me
Okay.
as an athlete because it's like, okay, I did the big thing now. Now I can just compete to the best of my ability and not have to worry about have that lingering thing on my head like, oh, will I ever make the Olympics? Like, I know I made it, and so now I can just go out and compete. And then at the same time, also realizing that this is just another race, and just because you're an Olympian doesn't mean that they're going to go easy on you. Just because you're an Olympian doesn't mean that you can slack off now. You still have to stay within the process. What got you to the Olympics to this point. Continue to do those things that is going to help you progress further and further in the years to come, for sure.
What's one of the changes that you're going to make this Olympic cycle, or what change? I mean, the Olympic cycle started a while ago. You're halfway through it. What changes have you made to your approach last Olympic
Yeah,
cycle to this one?
yeah. I think so. The last Olympic cycle, I learned a lot about mindset for sure. I think I want to do a better job of teaching it to people. And I say
Okay.
that because when you teach, you also learn.
Hmm.
And I think sometimes when I'm teaching these stuff to people, it's also serving as a reminder to myself and it's holding myself accountable to some of the things that I'm telling athletes to make sure that I'm also doing myself. So that's probably one of the things I'm going to do differently. And then from a training perspective, yeah, definitely we switch some things up a little bit just because I'm getting older. I want to make sure that I can still sprint. So we're sprinting a little bit more this season and stuff like that. Not as much as we did before, but then also still keeping up of the good things that I did do, like the stretching and the activation stuff beforehand, and just making sure that I'm still consistent in like taking care of my body and getting done what needs to get done off the track as well.
Dude, I love what you said about teaching as an opportunity to learn. Because one of the things that for me I hold very close is that if I'm going to teach others how to operate a value based business, my business better be locked in and super valuable. If I'm going to teach people to prioritize their schedule, well, my schedule has to better well be prioritized. And if I'm going to coach people on nutrition, my nutrition better be dialed in. I gotta be able to walk the walk. And so the language that I use is I have to be the product of my product. And it
I
sounds
love
like
that.
because you were your first client, you are the proof. You are the product. So if you go out and you're having an amazing time and you're making progress and you're smiling at the end of the race because you're fulfilled by the outcome, even though that the outcome doesn't necessarily matter to you, it was the process to get there. I think that serves as a phenomenal guide for like a blueprint almost for that young athlete to follow. Because, dude, the evidence is there. You weren't a great college athlete. You weren't someone who is highly recruited to these clubs. And yet you stood at the highest level of your sport and competed with the best in the world. That's super cool, man. You should be really, really proud of yourself. Um, there's one question that I ask all the guests that have been actually, you know what? Before I do that, how do I get faster? And don't tell me to lose weight.
No, so I think one way, I think, I think one way you can get faster is one by actually sprinting, by actually running fast. I think sometimes people forget that you have to sprint in order to get fast, and so
Hmm.
obviously sprint within your own capabilities. Don't do too much, and break up the training. Like if you want to get a faster 5K, don't just do long runs, but do some interval work, like do like you how you mentioned, a minute of running and 1 minute off, interval training like that, like 2 minutes on, 1 minute off, and go from there. And then also like after your run, try to incorporate some strides. That'll help you, keep that turnover going after a run and stuff like that. So those are some ways that you can get faster, especially if you want to, get better at like distance running and stuff like that.
Yeah, I made the joke about losing weight because I'm working my a friend of mine is my coach and he's run a number of ultra marathons and he's a big endurance guy, but he's also the strength and conditioning coach for Army Tier 1 Rangers. And he's kind of like, listen, like if you lose weight, you'll get a lot faster. And I'm like, dude, I love being big and jacked. I don't want to lose weight. Um, but I also recognize that I'm not in a physical position yet to start sprinting because my calves keep getting fucked up.
Oh man. Then we gotta get you a massage gun, massage those calves, use the gun to drill them out a little bit, and then do like some calf stretches and stuff like that before and after running, or calf raises, even any little exercise you can do, just kind of get them loose and warmed up and ready to go.
Appreciate the guidance. So the question that I ask all the guests on the podcast is, if you had a billboard on the side of the highway and anyone driving down the highway could read it and see it, what would it say?
Oof, that is such a good question. And honestly, what it would say is be your biggest fan. And I say that because I think honestly and truly, I think that's honestly what's helped me get to this point of just being a fan of me, right? And not like in an arrogant and cocky way, but
Right.
really just, the way people hype fanboy and fangirl over the certain athletes or certain celebrities. If we fanboy and fangirled over ourselves, we wouldn't have so much self-doubt. We wouldn't have so much negative self-talk. And so I tell athletes all the time, be your biggest fan, because someone you're a big fan of, you're not going to talk to them crazy. So being a fan of yourself will help you be compassionate to yourself. Like I remember, I know I'm going on like a tangent here, but I
No, no,
remember
please.
Kobe, when LeBron surpassed Kobe in the shooting. I think so. He beat some record of Kobe's, and then someone
Mhm.
commented who was a big Kobe fan. He said, "Still the GOAT, though," and that stood out to me because it's like, yo, this is someone who's a fan of somebody. Like, no matter what they do, they're still gonna ride for them, and so it's important that we ride for ourselves the same way we would someone we're a huge fan of. So it would say, be your biggest fan.
I love that. The last question I have for you is, if there was somebody that you would like me to interview or you would like to see me interview on the podcast, who would it be? But the caveat is that you have to help me get them on.
Ooh, that's a good question. Uh, who would it be? It would. Damn, I'm trying. This is hard. Um,
Good questions.
it is a good question. It would possibly be maybe either my coach or one of my other friends who's also an Olympian, because he does a lot of mindset stuff too, and he has a nonprofit called Believe Athletics. So my friend Chidi, maybe him too.
That'd be
Yes,
great. I think
yeah,
that'd
so
be a good call. Okay, cool. I'm going to reach out to you for that intro for sure.
awesome.
Edose, man, thank you so much for the chat today. It was great to learn more about you, great to learn more about your journey, how you've managed to transform that journey into an opportunity to serve others. I always say that the purpose of the podcast is to showcase great people who do great things for great people. And you're definitely one of those people. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I truly appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Please make sure to like, share, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and we'll catch you on the next one.